Hey everybody, welcome to another World Cup exciting episode of Phil the Mic. As always, am Darrin Michael, and with me, the man back from Qatar, Mr. Phil Cleese. Phil, I just don't understand. You don't even know how to spell soccer. How are you connected with the U.S. men's soccer team?
I don't know, but it's worse than that because I was walking around saying Qatar the whole time I was there.
You can't say Qatar. There's no U,
I was saying There's always a U after a Q. Who would have thunk it? Who would have
except in
thunk it?
except in the Middle East where it's not necessary.
I was
So
walking
so
around saying, "How do I get to Qatar?"
so
I was
let me
wondering why
ask you
everybody was
this.
looking at me funny. Now I
Let me
know.
ask you this. How is Qatar? What's it like over there? I know they have a ton of money because the entire country sits on oil. What's
It's
it
it's
like over there?
it's confusing.
It's
It's
confusing.
it's confusing. It's like a Disney World met South Beach, but with no one who looks like me. It's like weird. It's like a weird spot.
And
But it's a fun place. I recommend everybody go there for 3 days. Go check out
okay.
the United States embarrass themselves in the World Cup and have a couple days there. Enjoy it.
So you went over there to get the team all pumped. I mean, you are a legendary speaker. You are a motivational speaker, unlike anybody that we ever heard before. That's why teams keep hiring you to go all over the world to speak to them to get them pumped up. What were you saying to this team at halftime? They're up 1-0. They're feeling good. What was your speech like when you were talking to them?
I tried to say to them, they were amped up. They were like, I was getting this vibe that they were like a little bit nervous, and I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
looked at all of them, and I did a once around, like I was Herb Brooks in the '80 Olympics, and I looked at them, and I didn't deliver like Herb did, of course.
Of
But I
course.
looked at them, and I just said, guys, why is everybody so nervous? Nobody back home's watching this. Nobody cares. I said, go out there. You're playing this in front of your loved ones. That's the only ones that like soccer in the US. Now go out there and score some goals. You're playing against 40-year-old Walesmen. The Walesmen. All right, guys? This team's got 9 people in the country. It's England's JV squad. Can you beat the England JV squad? And apparently the answer to that is no. No, we can't.
I mean, you know what? I'm watching this game, right? I'm getting excited. There's only 10 minutes left in the game. It's the 81st minute, and the friggin' guy commits a foul inside the penalty box. The Wales guy, the old superstar who's always wanted to score a goal in the World Cup. They haven't been in the World Cup in like God only knows how long. Gets up there and he scores a goal, and hopefully that's it for his career. His career's over. The last thing on his bucket list. He's going to go and just ride off on a cow into the countryside and be done with it. So it was an easy win for the U.S. It was an easy 3 points for these guys, and instead they tie. So now it's going to be an uphill battle because they've got England next. Who England is obviously a significantly better team than the U.S. Coming off
Significantly.
a 6-2 win over Iran. So we're in a lot of trouble. We're in a lot of trouble. But the
I think
one,
we
the
were
one,
I think we were in a lot of trouble when we qualified.
we
We were
were,
better served when we didn't qualify.
but you
So
know what? Listen, we don't talk much soccer, but there was an enormous upset, and it was Saudi Arabia beat Argentina.
hmm
Saudi Arabia actually in the world is ranked 51st, and Argentina is actually ranked third. So they've likened this like a 16-1 upset in college basketball, which we know has happened one time. Matter of fact, Saudi Arabia is so excited about it, they've already made that day a national holiday for winning us. If we win a soccer match, what do they do here? Well, nothing because nobody's watching it, right?
I mean, listen, the United States. There was a famous joke that went around. I forget where it was from, but if you think back, when did Beckham? Remember when he was super famous?
Yeah,
He
yeah,
came over to the MLS, right? It was like a big deal. Like, what's
yeah,
his name?
yeah.
What's his first name? David Beckham.
David Beckham played for the
David came
Galaxy.
over,
Yeah.
and I forget who said it to him, but there was like an award show, and he looked at him and he goes like, David Beckham is playing in the MLS. He's like, dude, made soccer in the US this much more popular. He's like, nice job. Like, dude, that's what it is. Nobody cares about soccer
You
here.
know
People
what?
care about it until you're 17. After you get done with high school, then you go play a real sport.
You know
You
what
can play
though?
it through high school.
I happen to disagree. They
Ugh.
they keep expanding the MLS, and the MLS stadiums are packed.
Yeah, because you
They're
can
packed.
I can find you a bad comedian that I think is atrocious, that we all, for the most part, would agree is not funny. But he can have a 75 to 100,000 United States fans. Like you can find 100,000 people that like anything. We got how many people are in the United States? 350 million.
Something like that.
You could find 1% of people that like everything.
Well,
They do like a -2 rating on TV. When they get ratings on TV, wake me up, because that'll mean the majority. That'll mean enough people actually like it. Besides the
well,
30,000 fans
the
watching
games the
the
games are
Portland Sounders,
televised.
the Portland Sounders or whatever they're called.
I can't believe you actually know a name of a team. Do you know
I
any other teams?
I think I might have mixed up the name with the sound. I don't think they're the Portland Sounders.
No, the Seattle Sounders, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
What about the team in New York? You know what they're called?
yeah, New York FCCYZ.
Yeah,
FC
that's right.
FC's
They're
FC
all like
NYFC
it's all like New York
CES.
football team,
Yeah, New York.
Colorado football team.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a little more popular than you
We
think,
just
but that's
spent
okay.
6 minutes on this. I think we wasted our audience's time. Let's move on.
I think they're falling asleep.
Yeah, I think so. Let's get to the
Okay,
real sports.
let me ask you a question. Speaking of real sports, how excited are you? Friday, 2 days from now, I will be
We're
taking
skipping Thanksgiving. You just
I will
skipped
be
right over
I
Thanksgiving.
will be taking my 100th Pilates class, which means I get to go on the board, the wall of the 100 classes. There's a 100, there's a 250, a 500, 750, and a 1,000. I mean, that's a lot of money. So I will be permanently immortalized on the 100 class wall
Here,
on
I'm gonna bring
Friday.
this camera down a little bit. I'm gonna
And
give you the old Nancy. I'm gonna give you
I'm
the
gonna
old
wear my
Nancy Pelosi clap.
100. I'm gonna wear my 100 shirt. I'm gonna give a big speech, and there's gonna be Nancy standing behind me.
Make sure you
Great
don't move
speech,
any
Darrin.
Make sure you don't move any part of your face or anything.
Tell me, man, I know you're excited about that. Come on, be honest.
That's cool.
You're jealous.
I'm proud of you. No, I'm proud of you.
And it only took me almost 2 years, so that's not bad.
Not bad, dude. Nice job.
That's not bad.
Excellent
That's not
job.
bad. So before we get into to all the football stuff, I wanted to just talk about something else. The Pro Football Hall of Fame just came out with their semifinalists for 2023. It's a list of like 28 guys. I'm not going to go through them, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the 5 guys that are on the list for the very first time. They just became eligible.
Yep.
And I want you to tell me if you think these 5 guys are going to get in the Hall of Fame their first year.
And as a disclaimer to our audience, you tend to be a little bit more liberal with your yeses, and I'm a little more conservative with my yeses, just so we set the stage.
All right. Well, let's see. All right. First one, Dwight Freeney.
Yes.
Outstanding passer. You think he deserves it?
He has a lot of sacks. I remember him being a game-wrecking guy for a while.
He is. He was a great player. A great player. But,
first, I like to go by my guttural first reaction to somebody. I say yes.
Listen, I think all the guys are really Hall of Famers.
I know that. That's why I gave our audience a disclaimer.
The problem is with the NFL, unless you are literally like the best of the best, you don't get in on the first ballot. Well, that's just the way they do it for some odd reason.
You're asking me if I think that person's a Hall of Famer. The first one you asked me, I said Dwight Freeney, yes. But I
said first ballot Hall of Famer.
Oh, I was going to separate. I wanted to hear all the names before I said Hall of Fame overall or yes on the first ballot.
I'll give you the 5. I'll give you the 5 guys. Okay.
Go.
Now, the funny thing is, I hadn't even heard of one of these guys, which is really strange. Obviously, Darrelle Revis, you've heard of. Joe Thomas, Dwight Freeney, James Harrison, and Jari Evans. Do you know who Jari Evans is?
No.
I had never even heard of this guy. He's up for Hall of Fame.
Cornerback?
No, he was an offensive lineman, mainly with the Saints. He won a Super Bowl 4-time. He was a 4-time first-team NFL.
I'm ready to make my prediction.
6-time Pro Bowl, 2010 All-Decade from Bloomsburg University in Maryland, Division II. 183 games played, 183 games started. Never heard of him either, but he's up for Hall of Fame. So anyway,
and all of these people retired in the same year.
They all retired in 2017.
2016,
2017 was their last year.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
Revis first ballot without a doubt. Dwight Freeney, I'm going to stick with first ballot. James Harrison, close but no. Jari Davis, no. Joe Thomas, no, but Hall of Famer.
You don't think Joe Thomas is a first ballot Hall of Famer?
No.
He was literally, I think
No,
he was a first team All Pro his first 10 seasons. And then season 11, he got injured.
I know he lost half of a Joe Thomas when he retired.
Like Joe, yeah, I know. Seriously, Joe Thomas is literally one of the greatest offensive linemen in pro football history.
Maybe it's just because he played on such a bad team for a decade. I don't know.
I,
He
I'm
made he meant
telling you,
nothing. He made no difference in any of their 2-win
no,
teams.
no, but he was. I
So
mean,
I don't know.
what's a tackle going to do? Tackle going to win a Super Bowl for you?
I don't even think they had a good offensive line when he was there.
They had Joe Thomas. Joe Thomas was the man. So
All right, you're
I,
gonna
I think
disagree with me. It's fine.
I'm thinking Revis and Thomas. The other guys are,
I
I
thought
guess,
Dwight
Hall of
Feeney
Famers.
was Dwight Feeney in the top 10 in all-time sacks, or am I messing up?
He might
I
be.
thought he was, and to me that would be he's at more of a game-wrecking position. That's why I was putting him ahead of Thomas. I said Thomas is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, he,
I thought Dwight Feeney was in the top 10 in sacks. I might be overstating his performance. Maybe I'm forgetting.
he had 125 sacks.
That's got to be in the top 10, no?
It's really, I don't think it is.
No,
All-time sack leaders. All right.
be careful on your Google. That could mean a lot of things when you put that in
Yeah.
Google.
Oh my God, I didn't want to see that. Well, if we look at the all-time sack leaders, right? He comes in at 18.
Then I'm gonna go Tom. I'm gonna switch it. I'm gonna go Thomas, and I'm gonna take him out. I thought he
Now,
was in the top 10, which to me was an automatic first ballot.
well, listen, you know what? No, because the top 10 are not all in. I mean, you've got Bruce Smith, Reggie White, Kevin Green. Number 4 is Julius Peppers.
Yeah, but he's not in because of just age, or he's
Right.
not
Well,
in.
he's not there yet, but
Yeah, well, he will be.
I can't believe he
Yeah,
was fourth
he
though. I
was
mean, that's incredible.
amazing.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was good. Chris Dolman's in, Michael Strahan's in, Jason Taylor. I don't think he's in
Yes,
yet.
he's a. If he's not, he has to get in.
Terrell Suggs,
He's a.
Demarcus Ware,
Yeah, these are all
and
Hall of
Richard Dent.
Famers.
These
These
are
are
all the
all
top
Hall of
10
Fame.
guys.
I'm saying
I,
whether they're in yet, they're all Hall of
oh,
Famers, though.
I'm not arguing with you.
You
Then you've
can't you
got
can't play one of the most critical positions in the NFL, be one of the top 10 all time at doing something, and not be a Hall of Famer to me.
listen, I don't disagree. I don't
I
disagree. I
appreciate
don't
that.
disagree. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I mean,
We didn't even kick off the show with a little Thanksgiving talk. Thought we were gonna talk a little turkey.
you want to talk a little turkey? Let's talk a little turkey. Happy Thanksgiving, my man, even though it's tomorrow is Thanksgiving.
I know, but our show, by the time you get the little dot the I's, cross the T's, you probably get this thing out close to Thanksgiving morning.
No, maybe I will get it out tomorrow morning. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'll
All
get it out
right. Well,
today.
happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Hope everybody enjoys it. It
I hope
happens to be my
everybody's having
second most
yeah.
favorite holiday of the year.
What's your first? Behind Arbor Day.
Arbor Day for sure. Well,
Yeah, yeah.
from an eating perspective, it's my second most favorite. Christmas Eve is my most favorite because it's a big seafood Italian festival feast, and I love the food related to Christmas Eve. What would you know? You're Jewish. What would
Dude,
you know about Christmas Eve Italian dinners?
my wife is Catholic and Italian.
Catholic
So
has nothing to
what
do with
would
it.
I
You just
know?
named a religion, by the way. That just disqualified you automatically. What does
I
Catholicism have
do,
to do with what you eat?
do you know how many years I grew up? Not grew up, but you know how many years I had those dinners? I've had those dinners.
What kind of dinners, though? Is it a
Wait,
real
nope.
authentic Italian dinner? Is it like
Of course,
I'm
it was.
Italian, like
Okay, dude, come on. Seriously,
well,
seriously, you're
was it
asking that question?
grandmother's making it, or was it your wife?
No, it was my mother-in-law that was
Okay.
making it.
No,
So it
all right. Well, then
was
that's great. That's
it was
fantastic.
authentic. It was authentic,
All right. Well,
and
if you tell me it was authentic, I'll take your word as a Jewish man saying that the Italian food was authentic. All right. I'll take
thank
your
you.
word.
Thank you. Thank you. I
Only because I
appreciate that.
love you, not because I normally would take a Jewish person's
Man,
word on Italian food.
if people just knew how you treated me outside of this podcast, the name calling, the shaming, I don't even know what you're shaming me for or why you're calling me names, but man, sometimes it hurts my feelings.
We should probably talk about it off air. We'll air
Okay,
it
all
out.
right, we'll talk about it. All right, so let's get into it, man. And I think I owe you a Nancy Pelosi clap also for your performance. Now, people might not realize this, and you sent in your picks from Qatar. It was the middle of the
Qatar.
night
Yep.
in Qatar when I was recording. And thank you. I did do an admirable job. You're out. You actually, in your last 2 weeks of Phil's big three, you're 7-0, dude. That
I'm
is
crushing it. College football, I'm red hot.
redonkulous.
I'm
I mean,
sizzling hot.
you're literally 22, 11, and 1 on the season. All right.
Yeah.
There is not an expert out there that can touch your
I
handicapping skills.
I know. I actually been approached by a couple podcasts to ditch this podcast and go right on to the college football handicapper lines. The problem is those guys are so fat. I don't want to get on those podcasts with those guys.
It's like
You're
which
much,
one of these guys
yeah,
doesn't fit, you know?
yeah, yeah. I don't want to get on with Louie and Tony two times. I don't want to get on there with them. I like our
Hey,
podcast.
Tony, Louie, where's Philly? Hey, Philly, what's your picks? You know,
Yeah,
none of that. You don't think that would
yeah.
work out?
I don't want to do it. Yeah.
But even fill up your bank account, man. You're 5-2 the last 2 weeks, which is phenomenal. 21-15 on the season, 2-1 last week.
Yep.
Obviously, you won your best bet and your lock of the week. Dude,
Yeah.
what's gotten into you, man? You're just like the second half at the end of the season, man. You're like inspired.
I mean, I had a monster NFL season last year. I got
You
off to
did.
that
You
bad
did.
start, but now I've kicked it into high gear,
That's
and
true.
I am 12-4 in my last 16 NFL picks.
That's
So that's
considering
more
you're
like what
picking
I was
against the
last
spread.
year. I got off to a lousy start 0-3 to start the year. I've been playing uphill, but now I'm 6 over, 7-3 best bets. So I'm giving you something to. Oddly enough, I'm only 6-5 best bets with college football while I'm 22-11-1 overall. So that's a little bit of an anomaly. I haven't been great on the best bets with college
That's
football.
right. That's right.
But overall, let's put it all together, us math majors, I am 43-26
That's
with one
phenomenal.
tie.
That's
43,
phenomenal.
26, and 1. I didn't do the math in my head, but that's got to be what, about a 63% clip? Something like
You know,
that?
when I go out there and I look at some of the experts picks, the top ones are like 5 games over 500. That's it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Be like
Trash.
35-30. Here you are at 43-26 is just absurd. Absolutely absurd. And I look
Yeah.
forward to the picks this week to see where
Yeah.
you go. But here's what I wanted to talk about, and I think there's a lot to talk about with college football.
Let's do it.
The top 4 teams last week really struggled. I don't know if you had a chance to watch the games, but UGA beat Kentucky by 10 points. Ohio State, yeah, they beat Maryland by 13, but come on, this is not a great Maryland team, and Maryland was in that game for a long, long time. Number 3, Michigan, you called it, man. You took Illinois plus
Illinois
17.
almost won that game outright.
Yeah, they won by 2 points, and then you had TCU that had to kick a field goal with no time on the clock to beat Baylor 29-28. These 4 teams for the end of the season are not looking strong. Not only that, you got other teams. You got team like Tennessee. I know they lost their quarterback for the rest of the season, which means their season is completely done. What kind of team that is serious about being a football team allows South Carolina to put up 63 points on them?
Not a
I mean,
serious one.
it's absurd. And then you've got USC, which yeah, they had a tough matchup in number 16 UCLA. 48-45. You guys playing any defense out west or what? So
Yeah.
it's really, really interesting. And then when we look at our playoff right now, we've got Georgia 1, Ohio State 2, Michigan 3, TCU 4. TCU has a really easy schedule. Okay, there is no doubt in my mind they're going to make the playoff. 5 and 6, you've got LSU and USC, and then Bama, Clemson, and Oregon. You got a lot of SEC teams in there.
Yeah.
What is going on with this SEC BS? Because the SEC is not as great as they appear to be.
No, they're not. Um, I think this is a year where the 12-team playoff would have worked well
It would have been great.
because it would have been it's really jumbled. Georgia has every right to say they're the best team. They're still undefeated. Yada yada yada. After that, it's a little messy. Um, uh, you could make the case. You could go either two ways. You could say 12 teams, or you could actually say this is a good year for 2 teams. And the winner of the Ohio State Michigan plays Georgia if Georgia were to win out, and it's really clean. The two 12-0 teams meet or whatever.
Right,
But
right.
I'm not sure it's going to work out that clean. So it's messy. Yeah, the SEC. I feel like this year, probably more than most, the bias the eyeball test doesn't pass the bias. Like sometimes you sit there and say, listen, Alabama might have picked up, one loss along the way, but they're clearly one of the 4 best teams. But this year, the fact that Alabama's sitting there at 7 with 2 losses, but with like 3 or 4 other really close calls, and the Texas game sticks out to me when Texas played with their third string quarterback, should have beat Alabama, lost maybe on a last second field goal or something. There's been a lot of like just escape games for Alabama.
Mhm.
And then the Tennessee loss now doesn't look nearly as good because Tennessee, gives up almost, 60 whatever points. And, so that doesn't look good. LSU, again, playing well now, but still has two losses. And they're sitting there at 5 over USC with one loss. That doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. Unless you play a cupcake schedule, you can't be ahead of a team from another power conference when you have more losses.
Yeah,
Unless you have mega monster wins, and LSU's win over Alabama is not nearly as impactful when Alabama's sitting there with two losses and could have lost a bunch of other games. So it's like the SEC bias doesn't come from this idea. To me, it comes from the idea that if you overrate all the teams at the beginning, then you just get to keep saying that every time somebody beats somebody, look, well, what do you want to do? It's so competitive. But when you look at like Mississippi, Mississippi State, Kentucky, these teams all have 4 or 5 losses. Like, what's so impressive about them? We know Tennessee has no defense. They've been giving up 40, 50 points a lot. Georgia's aside from Georgia, I remember when Florida, I think, beat someone early in the year, people were like saying, oh, Florida's good. Florida's got like 5 losses now. I mean, it's not a great conference this year. So, but I will say this. You said it at the beginning. Oh, TCU's got an easy schedule. They're just in. I wouldn't go that far. TCU could lose to anybody. They're just not that good. So they're not a sure thing to make the playoff. They could. I mean, they just pulled out a game over a 4-loss Baylor team at the wire. They could lose to Kansas State in the Big 12 title game, or there's a loss out there for them. And you can never you can never undersell the pressure when you're sitting there win and get in. Sometimes that pressure collapses teams,
it's true.
particularly if they're not that great.
It's true. It's true.
But you have two games this week that really all eyes have to be on. Basically, two games. Obviously, Ohio State, Michigan,
Yep.
no brainer, right? Winner. Not only is the winner's in because the other half of the Big Ten is all garbage.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, it's not even competitive. The Big Ten's got to move away from these divisions. It ruins the conference title game. It's not the two best conference. They got to get rid of this. It's awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
the two best teams in the conference. It's an arbitrary division winner that's got, in this case, Purdue's got 4 or 5 losses. What are they in the Big Ten title game for? So Michigan and Ohio State, winners in, no brainer. And then the other game that's huge is Notre Dame USC,
Yeah.
because USC winning the Pac-12 means nothing if they have a second loss. So Notre Dame's already beat Clemson and damaged them severely. Clearly,
Yep.
Clemson
Yep.
hasn't
Yep.
recovered from that. They're sitting there ninth with one loss.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, the committee basically buried them.
Yeah. It's
So
true.
those are your two big games to watch. If USC beats Notre Dame, USC has got in the driver's seat to make the playoff. Because I'm sorry, at the end of the day, they will jump LSU. If the Pac-12 champ will obviously jump LSU, and they will select.
You would think so. You would think
Yeah,
so.
if they beat Notre Dame this week before even the title games, they'll flip them. USC will be back ahead.
This is interesting because yeah, those are the two big games. Next week there's another big game, and that's Georgia versus LSU. So
Well, that's the SEC title game. Yeah.
yeah. So you're looking at some interesting things going on. OSU and Michigan. Okay, one of the teams is going to lose, and then you've got LSU and Georgia, and one of those teams is going to lose. So if USC can beat Notre Dame, and I think that's USC's last game before the Pac-12 championship,
Yeah,
they're
it is.
truly in a great place to make the playoff. And the way
Amazing
that it
place. Yeah.
the
Mhm.
the way that it looks, I mean, obviously either, OSU and Michigan, obviously somebody's going to lose that game. They're gonna fall back. LSU and Georgia, I cannot see LSU beating Georgia. You never know what's going to happen, but it's great because finally at the end of the season, there's games that actually matter and actually influence the playoff at the very end of the season.
Can I make a prediction for you?
Please, please.
Here's my prediction, and I'm gonna hate this prediction. Like, I don't want this to happen at all. But here's what I think is gonna happen. It's
Yeah,
a very screwy college football season. Like, we can all agree, right? It's been a really screwy season.
unbelievable.
What I think is actually gonna happen is LSU is gonna beat Georgia. They're gonna both be in a position now where they have to both make it. And I think the loser of Michigan, Ohio State, provided it's close, which I think will both make the playoff. And the reason I say that is because I think TCU is going to lose.
Hmm.
And I think Notre Dame is going to beat USC.
Oh, wow.
And if that happens, I think you're going to have just an absolute garbage two Big Ten, two SEC teams because the Pac-12 will have been eliminated. Now you can make the case, could Clemson make it under that scenario, right? Then it gets down to this. Who gets in? And here's my question for you.
Yeah.
If what I just said happens, which is nothing is shocking, right? LSU has been,
It's not crazy. It's not
it's not
crazy.
crazy that LSU beats Georgia in I'm not saying they're not the favorite, but I'm saying if LSU beats Georgia and Notre Dame beats USC and TCU gets picked off one of the next two games, which they're not that good. They're TCU for a reason, right? Like we know they got 3-star recruits. There's a very good chance they could lose one of these games. Then who do you put in the playoff? Do you put especially if it's Michigan that beats Ohio State? So let's go with Michigan beats Ohio State.
Wow.
Okay. Ohio State at 11-1, right? No Big Ten title game, no Big Ten championship. Best win over Notre Dame, let's say, or Penn State. Those are their two best wins. Or Clemson, 12-1, ACC title champ, 21-point loss to Notre Dame. Best win might be like North Carolina or something. They don't have a great win. Who are you putting in? Are you putting in 12-1 Clemson off an SEC title, but a big loss to Notre Dame, or an 11-1 Ohio State team who beat Notre Dame but didn't even make the Big Ten title?
It's a really, really tough situation
I set it up that way on purpose.
if it unfolds like that. Now,
Yeah,
I don't think it's going to unfold like that
I
because
know, but just placate me here.
but if it's that case, but you also have to put into account the title games. And the SEC title game is going to be
No,
basically
I'm putting LSU and Georgia both in the playoff.
you're going to put them both in the
Well, if
playoff.
LSU beats Georgia, Georgia's not going to get eliminated, right?
I don't think OSU is great, and I definitely don't think Michigan is great. I think Michigan's schedule has
I know.
been
I'm saying Michigan picks
pathetic.
off Ohio State and is in, obviously. So
Yeah,
LSU, in my scenario, Michigan becomes the 1 seed, right? Because they're undefeated.
yeah,
Georgia goes
but
to
that's
goes to 2 because they only have 1 loss. LSU has 2 losses, so they're the only team to ever make the playoff with 2 losses. So I'll leave them at the 4 seed, just because they have 2 losses. Who's the 3 seed? Is it Ohio State
great
with 1
question.
loss or Clemson with 1 loss? But Clemson won the ACC title, but has a 21-point loss to Notre Dame, or Ohio State, who didn't even make the Big Ten title but beat Notre Dame by 11.
What
Who are you
about
putting in? You got nobody else to put in over those 2 teams.
I don't know, man. I you know what? If here's the thing, right? I mean, Notre Dame is
Are you
they
going to
start
make a
off.
damn decision?
No, give me a second. Notre Dame has start off the season not so great. They lost their quarterback. They're really playing good ball. Okay, so that beat down by Clemson, I think, holds a lot of weight. But if OSU loses their only game of the season and it's a dogfight to Michigan, as much as I don't like to admit it, I think you're probably right. If it goes down the way that you're saying it's going to go down, which I don't believe it's going to,
Of
but
course, I understand.
if LSU does beat Georgia, then yes, LSU is going to get in, but Georgia's got to stay in because they are the best team in football. Whoever wins that game, if Michigan wins, then they would be in.
Well, it's a harder sell. I
Yeah.
think so. Here, I agree with what you just said because I posed it that way.
Well, what
If it's
about
the opposite, if
yeah?
Michigan's the team that loses to Ohio State and it's Georgia 1, I'm sorry, if it's Ohio State 1, Georgia loses, but they're still in it too. LSU, let's say, has to stay at 4 because they have 2 losses. You can't move them higher than that, but you make them
Yeah.
make the playoff. I think Clemson would get in over Michigan
I
because
think
Michigan has no good wins.
no. I think there's a very distinct possibility that happens.
Right. And I think that's where Clemson then gets in. So if you're a Clemson fan watching the show, and we know we have tons of Clemson fans who
We do have a
follow
lot
us,
out there, yeah.
Clemson really needs Ohio State to beat Michigan
Yes,
and
but
needs Notre Dame to beat USC. Even more
but
importantly,
but you got to
they need USC eliminated because USC is in ahead of Clemson if
well
USC wins out.
you also have to remember something else, right? Alabama has one more game. They're playing Auburn. I mean, they beat Auburn.
No, Alabama's never getting into the playoff this year.
They're an SEC team. Why not?
Well, because the bias will still be the SEC. It just won't be to them. It'll be to LSU and Georgia.
Listen, it'll be fascinating if it works out that way. I really don't think that it will.
How interesting though that Notre Dame really holds the keys to a lot of the playoff again, because it affects USC, Clemson. It affects a lot.
It's, you know what?
Clemson is the biggest Notre Dame fan this Saturday night.
It's interesting. Listen, Notre Dame is always a good team,
They
right? And
always
they've,
find themselves in the mix though, even when they're not in the playoff mix, they're in the mix.
they're 8-1 in their last 9 games. They beat a ranked Clemson, they beat a ranked Syracuse, shouldn't really count. They beat a ranked BYU. Now they do have a couple bad
Well,
losses.
they also beat a ranked North Carolina team. North Carolina's in the top 20.
They're ranked at the time, or they're
Well, they're
ranked
ranked
now.
now. They're ranked now. I don't
Yeah,
know.
they lost to Stanford by 2. That's a bad loss.
Yeah,
They
it was.
they
They
lost
had
to
five
Marshall by
turnovers. I
5. That's a bad loss. But for the most part, they're playing good ball, and in their last 5 wins, they're averaging almost 40 points a game.
Yeah, and
So
they can only run the football. They have a backup quarterback, but they run
yeah,
it really,
yeah.
really well. And they have a really good offensive line. They're
So
a good team that's very one dimensional.
listen, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
I think
I
it'll be
don't know if
fun.
it's gonna if it ends up the way you say it, then yes, a 12-team playoff, that is the definition of why. But it seems like every year it kind of works itself out. So I wouldn't be surprised if
Usually it does. This year, I don't think it's going to.
well, let's see what happens. Let's see what
Yeah,
happens. Are they
yeah.
now when are they going to a 12-team playoff?
I think they said the earliest is 25.
Okay. Okay. They
It's a few more years like this.
it would be a lot more exciting, not to mention they would make a truckload more money if they went to a 12-team playoff. But it's
Again, I
exciting.
still think that one of the best selling points, and we talked about this before they ever announced it. We talked about this 2 years ago. One of the coolest things would be the first week in December watching campus hosted playoff games
That would be interesting.
with different weather conditions and all that goes with it, right? Like if you saw South Bend last weekend against Boston College, there was 2 inches of snow on the ground playing in a
Yeah,
blizzard.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
what football is, though.
Well, yeah, I can't argue with that. I
You know what
can't
I
argue with
mean?
that.
Like, Alabama one day might have to leave the South and go out to Eugene, Oregon to play a playoff game. It might have to happen, or pick your weird spot.
It would definitely be
It'd be
exciting to
fascinating
see that kind
TV.
of stuff.
It'd be
Yeah,
fascinating TV.
I agree. I agree. So let's hear it, man. You're 7-0. Let's hear your big three. Now is the moment, and this is going to be a tough week because now you've got. Now, I want to remind people that your incredible prowess this season, you're picking the best games of the week. It's not
Yep,
like you're
I'm
just
not picking
picking
my
any
three
game.
favorites. Yeah, I
You're
picked the best
picking the.
bets my own, but the
That's
other
right.
two are always the best two games of the
Always,
week.
always the best 2 games. So we know what the best 2 games are this week, and these are tough picks.
Yeah, these
So
two. Yeah, these are easily the two most impactful games. I mean, obviously, if Georgia's going to lose to Georgia Tech, that would be a major problem. But I'm not going to assume that's a
it's
tough
not
game.
going to happen.
So yeah, I mean the 12 o'clock kickoff, you got the Michigan Ohio State game. It's interesting. I've been very anti-Michigan in terms of mocking their schedule, which by the way, their strength of schedule is 93rd or 73rd. It's either 73rd or 93rd in football. So I wasn't mocking it for no reason. They
Yeah,
played
yeah,
a
yeah.
very weak
They really
schedule
did.
this year.
They really
Their
did.
out of conference schedule is like 103rd ranked. It's really bad.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've mocked Michigan all year, but I've oddly kept an eye on Ohio State and have never been as enamored with their performances this year, including a very deceiving 42-30 win last week against Maryland,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
included a time expiring defensive touchdown when Maryland was trying to lateral the ball. And Ohio State had to fend them off to win that game. So that was a 36-30 game with a minute and a half to go, and they won 42-30. It's misleading.
Well, can I just let me just interject for 1 second. When you look at these two teams, their schedules, I mean, you can't say that Ohio State has had a tough schedule either. When you look at the teams they played, their first game of the
Well, I mean,
season,
I can say Ohio State played Notre Dame out of conference. Michigan played literally no one out of
yeah,
conference.
that was their first game of the season, and that was their only tough game. And then each of these teams played Penn State.
Yeah.
But besides that, when you look at Ohio State, look who they've played.
Well, because the Big Ten stinks this year.
Maryland, Indiana, Northwestern, Iowa, Michigan State, Rutgers. They beat Wisconsin by 31. And then their other 2 games were Toledo and Arkansas State.
I know, but
They
who
have
did read
both
Michigan's
of their
three out of
schedules
conference
are
games though?
awful.
Michigan's
Oh,
at
Michigan's
least
schedule
Ohio
is even
State
worse.
played Notre Dame. Michigan played no one.
No, Michigan's schedule is even worse. They had Colorado State, Hawaii, a very tough UConn match that they won 59-0. Then they have the same. They played all the same games:
I know.
Maryland,
So really, it's
Iowa,
just the Notre
Indiana,
Dame
Michigan
game.
State, Rutgers, Nebraska, and then they
Yeah,
squeaked by Illinois. So you're talking about two
yeah.
teams that haven't played anybody
No,
really all season, because you can't really count the Notre Dame game because that was the first game of the season. So we
well, but it
put
was
that
with
out
Notre
the
Dame's
window.
better quarterback at least. But it was
It
a close
it
game. It
it
was a
was
close game.
no,
Notre Dame was winning
wasn't
at
bad.
halftime. It was a
It
good game.
wasn't a bad game, but
Yeah.
overall, these are two teams that are not really battle tested. Let's be
I
honest.
agree. No, I agree, and that actually is going to frame my pick.
All
My
right, so what
pick
do we
is going to
got?
be Michigan getting 7.5, and it's for two reasons. Last year, Michigan finally slayed the dragon, so to speak. They hadn't
Yep,
beaten Ohio State in like seemed like a decade.
yep,
Yeah, listen, it's not the same Michigan team. That team had Aiden Hutchinson wreaking havoc and a
yep,
Joe Boo on the other side of the line and some top end defensive players. They don't have those guys. But at the same time, Ohio State has just never fired the way people thought they were,
yep,
including when I saw them week one and just throughout. They never get the sense that they're just this juggernaut like some Ohio State teams are.
yep.
I just don't get that sense. So to me, Michigan no longer fears Ohio State.
That's
They
true.
they no longer feel like they can't beat them. And I think Ohio State, I think Michigan matches up well. Michigan wants to run the football. They want to control the clock. And I think Ohio State is more susceptible to a team running on them. Notre Dame was running on them for a while, and then in the first game it didn't stay that way. But I just think the 7.5 is a little too much. So I'm taking Michigan.
Well, you know what? You got to keep something else in mind. Michigan's all-world running back Blake Corum left the game early. He's questionable for this game.
Yeah, they have a
So
couple backs. I know.
that could really impact him because he's having a monster season. So
Yeah.
let's
He has to
keep
play
that in
this
mind.
game.
Yeah,
He better figure
he
out a way
has
to
to
get on the
play.
field.
He
He got
has
to
to
play.
play.
You
Okay.
got, shoot him up with steroids, get him on the field.
All right. So what's our next game here?
So then you go down to also just almost just as big a rivalry, Notre Dame US USC. They've played 90 something times.
It's a huge rivalry. Huge rivalry.
Um, and this is a contrasting game right here, right? So um, the only time I've spoken about Notre Dame this year really was the Clemson game in which I predicted Clemson would smoke them, and it was the
Yep.
opposite. So
Yep.
it's not like
Yep.
I was a Notre Dame homer this year. I
That's right.
recognize fully their flaws. They
Yep.
have a backup quarterback who I described as Stetson Bennett without talent, or maybe Stetson Bennett without athleticism, I think is what I said. I
Wait, first off,
100%
first
stand
off,
by that.
you're saying Stetson Bennett has talent. I mean, that's the
That's the
first
joke.
thing.
He's Stetson Bennett without the athleticism. That was my joke.
That's what it is. Okay.
And that was my joke, and I stand by it. If
Oh
you'd
my
like a
God.
different joke, Drew Pine is the skinniest kid at fat camp. It's another famous one I like to say.
That's a good one too. I like that.
He's not good. He's
Okay.
not good. He's 5'11. He's immobile. He gets every other ball batted down because he's 5'11. And they also don't happen to have the best receivers this year. So it's really, but they have a stable 3 running backs, Notre Dame, that are
Yeah. Yeah.
all incredible for different reasons. One is
Okay.
like your
Okay.
all weather back that can just take it and make moves and be a nightmare. One is like a fullback. He looks like Jerome Bettis, but without the fat. He's just a monster to take that. He's just a monster. And then they got the scat back guy who catches balls and goes to the house. So they have
Okay.
a stable of backs and
Yeah.
a great offensive line. Not a shocker. Notre Dame's been producing great offensive linemen for a while now. That's what Notre Dame is. They also have a cornerback, a freshman who's had, ready for this? You're not going to know this, so I'll blow your mind. 5 interceptions in the last 2 weeks. That's a lot of interceptions.
That's not messing around. That's pretty serious.
5 picks, including one back to the house, and he's been a monster. He's probably going to be on the first team All America team as a true freshman. Notre Dame does
Wow.
not usually have corners that are true All Americas as freshmen. Kid's a stud. They're going to
Seriously.
put him on the stud receiver on USC, who transferred from Pittsburgh after he was probably paid 11 or 12 million under the table. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. That's a little like, that's a big time matchup to watch. If you're watching
Yeah.
that game Saturday night,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
whatever the
Yeah.
receiver's name is. What is his name? Jordan something or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I
whatever
can't
his
remember
name
what his
is.
last name
You're
is.
watching the star receiver against the true freshman corner. That's must see TV. That's a big matchup to watch.
That's true. That's true.
So it's an interesting game. Caleb Williams, Lincoln Riley, USC can score, can score, can score. It's going to be, this is the game in a nutshell. Can Notre Dame possess the ball running the football like I described and shorten
Yep.
the game? And if they can do that, they can give USC some issues, because I do think USC is probably likely to get bullied a little bit, because Notre Dame's probably got a much more tough offensive line than USC's defensive line. But USC is going to hit some bombs and they're going to
Yeah. Oh
score
yeah.
points.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to take Notre Dame plus the 5.5. I think it could go either way. I'm not like in love with this pick. I try to separate my fandom from like what I think, but I
It's
do think
tough.
Notre Dame's playing good.
They are playing
And I
really well.
and I think USC, which has everything to play for, is still facing the toughest offensive line slash running back group that they will see this year. I don't think the Pac-12 is exactly set up the way Notre Dame is. Like, I think this is a unique kind of team they don't see every week.
Yep.
So I think there's going to be some inherent difficulties with this matchup. And I think the overall pressure of knowing they have to win this game keeps it close.
That's
If I
true.
had to
That's
pick a
true.
final score, I think it's going to be like 30-27 USC. I think USC ekes it out, but I think the 5.5 is enough to cover.
Okay.
And then I really like my best bet, but it's kind of for like a weird reason. My best bet is a bet more against Clemson, who's played a crappy schedule this year,
Yep. Yep.
and they haven't looked impressive either. And I guess the Notre Dame game still sticks out in my brain. Like, it's just, they got whooped. The game was never close. And South Carolina is not a great team, but getting 14.5 in what is an interstate game, so there's no travel here, I think is a little too much, because Clemson doesn't blow people out.
No, they haven't been.
And so I'm not trying to have SEC bias in the other direction, but I know South Carolina's played good teams all year. So to get 14.5 when Clemson doesn't blow anybody out to begin with, it just seems like way too many points. Now, maybe I'll be wrong, but it feels like a no-brainer best bet to me. I just think it's way too many points. And I'm trying not to just be about how they beat Tennessee 63-38. Don't get me wrong, because the week
Yeah.
before they
Yeah.
lost
Yeah.
38-6 to Florida. So South Carolina is a mess.
Who just
They're in,
lost to Vanderbilt.
yeah, they're an enigma wrapped in an uncertainty. So
Yeah. Seriously.
I have no idea what South Carolina is. Like I said, it's not a bet more for them. It's more a bet against Clemson doesn't blow people out. So that's my thought there. So that's my best bet. So I'm going Michigan plus. So it's all teams getting points. Michigan getting 7.5, Notre Dame getting 5.5, and South Carolina getting 14.5.
Nice. Nice.
But
Well,
I
let's.
am 7-0 in my last 7. So take it with you will. If you don't think to bet for me, you could take your chances betting against me. But good luck.
Good luck with that. Well, man, it's wrapping up to be the final the ending of the college football season is just turned out to be pretty
Bananas.
incredible. So
Yep.
it's gonna be great.
And
But
if
let's
you like football, you can't get a better weekend. From
you really can't.
Thanksgiving Day
Yeah.
games to the
Yeah. Yeah.
Friday college football games,
Yeah. Yeah.
culminating with Saturday kickoff at 12, Michigan, Ohio State, and then back ending 8 o'clock Notre Dame, USC. You really can't get a better 3 days.
No, it's gonna be a great weekend of football. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk a little NFL. And I'm gonna start off with a topic that is near and dear to my heart, but I'm sure that it seems like it's one of the biggest stories around the NFL, and that is the Jets and Zach Wilson. All right. So, and I know you and I have very conflicting opinions on this. He's, in the last game, he goes 9 for 22 for 77 yards, rating of 50.8%. The offense had 101 yards in the first half and 2 in the second half. Somebody asked him after the game, a reporter, they said, "Do you feel like you let the defense down at all?" And his response was no. And then he says, "I think you have to take into account it's windy as hell out there, guys." Okay, that's fine if it's windy as hell. But then explain to me, Zach, how Mac Jones goes 23 for 27 for 246 yards. So the question is, or actually what's come in recently is that Mike White is actually going to be starting the next game and they're
Hot
benching
off the
Zach
press.
Wilson,
Hot off the press as we speak. Yep.
which I think is the right move for a number of reasons. I'm not saying that he's not the quarterback of the future, but do you think the coach did the right thing? And how would you handle a situation like this?
No, I don't think so. I don't think they made the right decision. And I am first of all, I am extremely pro Joe Douglas, as you know. I've
Yeah.
been telling you he was the right hire from the moment
Yeah.
they made it.
Yeah. He's
And
been
I think
great.
he's
He's been great.
overall done a great job. Trades, draft picks, the whole 9 yards overall. I haven't been as in love with Robert Saleh, but because I have entrusted my franchise with the guy I think is the right GM, I'm going to by extension trust Saleh and Douglas's hiring of him. I've been mixed on Salah's results in terms of just what I see, not wins and losses per se. I've just been mixed. I think he's done a pretty good job this year. Here's where I think the problem comes from for me. If you look at Zach Wilson's body of work this year, and if people forget, he was hurt the first 3 weeks or whatever, 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So he's not the starter all season. He's the starter the last 6 weeks or 7 weeks. He's had two atrocious games, both against the Patriots. You can look up the stats. He's had two awful games. The Patriots do this to a lot of young quarterbacks. Bill Belichick has made a living whooping the crap out of younger quarterbacks. So it's par for the course. And the Jets have been absolutely eaten alive by the Patriots in the last decade. They just can't beat them. So to me, I'd like to see him play a bad Chicago Bears team this week. Then I would sit him on the bench and set up the next quarterback to have the cushiest game he's going to have all year, which is a Bears defense that's averaging, ready for this, giving up 36 points a game in the last 4 weeks, 0-4, and traded their two best defensive players away in the last 2 weeks. That is not the week you sit your number 2 pick, second year franchise quarterback. It's the week you see if some of this was Belichick and the Patriots, and if he could bounce back. That's my opinion. This isn't the week to bench him. Now, if you put him out there against Chicago, who you know is not a good defense, and he plays bad, then I'd have a quick leash. Maybe by halftime, I put the other guy in. And maybe after last week, and then I'd say, okay, it's not the Patriots, it's Wilson. But I just think it's a quick leash because now, are you after 20 starts in his NFL career done with Zach Wilson? Because if Mike White has a good game against the Bears, which he's very likely to have, it's a bad defense. I mean, everybody's scoring 35 against them. If he has a big game, how do you go back to Wilson? You can't. And you're in a playoff race. So you're not going back to Wilson. So are you, and now when the season ends this year, provided, let's say Mike White has 2 or 3 bad games, okay, then you can go back to Wilson, but the season's kind of over. Aside from that, if he wins this week and has a good game, you're probably going to stick with him. And if you're sticking with him, are you ready to now draft a new quarterback next year / make a trade for a veteran and be done with Zach Wilson? That's my issue. My issue is it's not the Jets overachieved this year record wise so far, but some of the overachievement was with players that are no longer there. Breece Hall was going to be an all-pro running back. He got hurt and it changed their offense dramatically. Elijah Vera Tucker was an all-pro offensive lineman. He got hurt in the same week. The offensive line is grossly banged up. It is not close to the offensive line they thought they were going to have. Elijah Moore got his period week 3, demanded a trade, and has never even been relevant to the season. So when you say like the Jets have this really good offense, no, on paper they did. And for a couple of weeks it looked good. And none of them have been there. Corey Davis has been out for a month. Mm-hmm. So like the kid isn't even throwing to the guys you thought he was going to be throwing to. They don't have the stud running back you thought. They don't have the offensive line they broke camp with. So I think he's become the scapegoat for New York media. He's been the scapegoat for the fans that want somebody's head because they lost to the Patriots for the 48th straight time in a row. And they can't beat the Patriots. And so he's the scapegoat. But the week before when they beat Buffalo and they were putting him in Canton, everything was fine. And that's what New York media does. It literally puts you in Canton and the next week sends you to jail. I just can't get down with the huge, 20-foot wave of emotion.
And I look at it a little bit differently. Okay. One, I think as the leader of the team, because he is the leader of the team, he's the quarterback, he needs to take a little more responsibility for his play. Okay. I've watched a couple games and yeah, they beat Buffalo. They've won some games, which is great, and they've lost some games. I don't see him completing the easy passes. I think he throws high. I think he throws behind. I don't think that he is playing well. That's my problem. I had a problem when we drafted him. I don't think he's a number 2 draft pick. I don't think he's a great quarterback. I really don't, and I never have. And I hope to God that he proves me otherwise. But when I look at him, I see a 15-year-old punk who doesn't have any accountability, and he's just out there just doing his thing. And that's just what I see. I don't know what's really going on. And like I said, I hope that he turns out to be good. But I do think that benching him is the right call. I think that you need to drive a little, hey, you know what? If you're going to be a quarterback in this league, you've got to play well. I don't care if your offensive line is banged up. I don't care if you don't have the greatest receivers. When you do have the chance to make passes, you've got to make good passes. And he's not making good passes. So I like the fact that he's benched. I don't think they're going to bench him the entire season, but I think he needs to see what's going on from the sidelines to understand how he should be out there playing. That's my thought with it. So it's conflicting to a point, but I think that we agree in a lot of different ways.
I mean, listen, if he wouldn't be the first quarterback that was drafted high to get benched, come back and win the job and be good. So I'm not specifically anti you can't send a kid to the bench and it ruins his career, because if he's that fragile, then he's not the answer anyway. So I'm not trying to say that.
Right.
But I do think if you were looking to cause a even bigger, like I look at it, I watch every Jet game. I did not watch this past game. I was away with the kids, so I did miss the last game. And it was a horrific game. And I got every text from my cousin and everybody who hates him saying he's the worst player of all time. But it's the same people that told me Salah is the worst coach of all time and Joe Douglas should have been fired for his first year's draft. So this is the New York fan base. This is the media. It's out of control. And when you're wrong and you scream from the rooftops and it doesn't matter because, you're not actually their New York fans are just too emotional, and Jet fans, because they've lost for decades and decades, are just lost creatures. They're just awful.
That's right.
But
that's right.
My thing is, I would have given him the first half of the Bears game because I think the defense would have kept them in a position to still win the game. And if he didn't play well, I then would have turned it to Mike White in the second half. I just think it was the right. I don't want to judge a kid based on his worst performance in Foxborough in a crappy weather game. Because Mac Jones had a better game than him, but Mac Jones scored 3 points himself. Like the Patriots didn't score either. They scored on a punt return as time expired. Basically,
I know
they didn't score at all. So it's not like they did anything either. So I'm just saying. But the accountability part, I agree with you. My answer after the game was horrible game. Apparently, worst press conference. So it was a bad press conference, but he's 22 years old. He had a bad press conference. I'm not going to kill him for it.
No, you're not going to kill him for it. But this is how I see it. Okay. If he had just had a bad game and then after the game, his attitude was different, he'd still be starting this week. That's how I look at it.
You might be right.
I think the reason that he's not starting is because he took no accountability at the end of that game. That's why I think that press conference, yes, he's a young guy. He made a mistake, but that's a really crappy attitude, crappy thing that he said.
It is.
He played horribly, and he needs to say, you know what? I played horribly. I'm going to work my ass off this week. I'm going to come out and I'm going to show you a different Zach Wilson next week. That's what I wanted to hear. And if I had heard that, guess what I would have said? Okay, Zach, go do your thing. But he didn't say any of that.
I can't argue that.
That's the problem I have. And I think that's why he was benched.
I can't argue that. And maybe that was why he was benched. But I do have a little bit of I won't get into all the reasons behind it, but I do think it's a little bit fraudulent's not the right word. Selective outrage maybe is the right word or phrase, because the same rumor mill and the same innuendos coming out of the Jet locker room, like Zach Wilson's going to lose the locker room and he didn't have did you believe what he didn't take accountability and all this stuff? Like, I got to call it a little selective outrage, because where was that same energy for Elijah Moore? Now, I understand one's a wide receiver, but that dude demanded a trade after they were on a 2-game winning streak, and nobody even talks about it. He's welcome in the clubhouse. He's hugged. You got people on social media posting like, "Oh, he's the greatest thing in the world." He's got less catches. He's got one more catch than you or I do in the last 6 weeks. He's done nothing. So he not only did he demand to be traded because he's selfish, he then has backed his performance up with one more catch than you and I. And yet he's okay. It's like no big deal. Elijah Moore's fine. So it's selective outrage.
Yes.
Zach Wilson, I don't want to get into all the reasons, but he looks like he should be surfing on a beach in California. And I think because he comes from money, there's a lot of selective outrage because he looks and acts the way he does, maybe, than Elijah Moore, that
Yes.
somehow is forgiven for demanding a
In a
trade.
in a sense, yes, but
I think that's really unfair.
the one thing that separates them, the one thing
Yeah,
that separates
quarterback
them,
versus receiver, the position.
quarterback, you've said it yourself many times.
Yeah, I get
A
it.
team is not going to be great until they have that franchise quarterback.
But it's absolutely ridiculous that
And he's
people have.
supposed to be a franchise quarterback.
No, I
That's
agree.
why.
But also, like, I agree.
That's the way the world works. It's
That
ridiculous,
quarterback
yes.
class doesn't look good either. So
No,
right
not
now,
at
it
all.
looks
Not
like
at
a
all.
lot of misses, right? Trevor Lawrence has not been, he was supposed to be the generational Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning. That hasn't been the case. Justin Fields has been up and down. Trey Lance is not even somebody you could even grade yet. Mac Jones, the bloom fell off that thing. So, like, at the end of the day, it could just be a bad drafting class. So they may not have even drafted the wrong guy. It might have just been the wrong year to need a quarterback.
Maybe.
I mean, I'm
Who
just saying,
knows?
like, the 5 or 6 of them, none of them look good. Who's the
Well,
best quarterback out of that class if you were redrafting? It'd be hard to rank them. You'd
it
probably keep Trevor Lawrence 1, but he hasn't been good.
Cody Pickett.
Don't even know who Cody Pickett is. Is
Is
that
that his
Kenny's
name? Cody
little
Pickett?
brother? Kenny Pickett?
Kenny Pickett. Yeah.
Kenny
Why did I
Pickett
say
was
Cody?
this year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're right. You're right.
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
know. I don't know.
I
No,
don't
I'm
know.
saying that class is bad. It's been a bad draft class.
So far, you're right. You're absolutely right. So I guess
So,
who the hell knows? We could talk about this forever, but I want to move on to our second point, and that is the great and powerful franchise, the Carolina Panthers, lost to Baltimore 13-3. I was kind of annoyed by that because Baltimore didn't cover. All they had to do was kick a field goal at the end, and they would have covered. But
yep.
the Panthers, they just can't make up their mind. Do we want PJ Dynamite Walker? Do we want Baker Mayfield? Do we want Sam Darnold? You know what? It's almost like they're just flipping coins everywhere. And it's like this week we're going with Sam Darnold.
Yeah, well,
So let me ask you a question. Does it even matter who plays quarterback for these guys? Or is there one guy that you think should be the quarterback? It just doesn't even matter, right?
no, the franchise is starting over. This is just a placeholder until they move on from the whole group. I mean, when you trade McCaffrey and you trade, they've made a few other trades. I mean, they clearly have punted on the season, figuratively, and most games literally.
Yeah.
So no, it's placeholder. It's one guy to the next guy to the next guy. No, I don't think it matters.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Number 3, the Washington, and I'm not calling them Commanders, the Washington Redskins have won 5 of 6 games. Is Taylor, don't call me Heineke, a legitimate NFL quarterback now?
I mean, listen, he's got a little scrappiness to him. He's got a little tough mindedness. I've liked what I've seen, but they're gonna win and lose based on that front seven's really good.
Of course.
So he's got to make a few plays, and they got to rely on that defense. And the formula's worked lately, so we'll see. But I think he's pretty decent. He's okay.
Yeah. And I wonder what team Carson Wentz is going to be moved to next year. Just food for thought.
Carson.
Number 4, thought number 4. Cowboys 40, Vikings 3. What do you take out of this game?
Give me one more week to decide on the Vikings, because sometimes you just have an aberration, and I'm not gonna put that much stock in the Vikings.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. When you get like a statistical anomaly, I'm going to leave it as an anomaly until I see the trend go down and say, okay, something went wrong with the Vikings. But one really bad week, although it looks bad, they're 8-2. They got a 4-game lead in the division, or whatever it is. 5-game lead, maybe 4-game lead. They're going to run away with the NFC North unless they just collapse. So, I mean, maybe they just got caught, they just got caught on a really bad game. I'm not going to put that much stock in it. They play the Pats Thanksgiving night. Most people don't realize there's a third game after the Lions and Cowboys. There's actually some pretty good games. I mean, the Lions are playing decent football. So Bills Lions could be more interesting than you think. Giants Cowboys could be I think the Cowboys are better, but it's still a good division rivalry, 2 good teams. And the Pats Vikings, a big game now with the Pats having beat the Jets. It's a good game. If the Vikings come back out and play well, I'll just chalk it up to an anomaly. If they get dominated by the Pats, then something went wrong. And
so what are your thoughts on the Cowboys now? Are the Cowboys for real?
Oh, I mean, I think the Cowboys are always for real. I think the Cowboys' problem is they always underachieve in the playoffs. the Cowboys, when healthy, have been a good franchise in the last
Yeah,
3, 4
yeah,
years.
yeah.
It's just that
They're
they've
seven
had
and three.
yeah,
You
I mean
know,
they're a pretty good team. It's I don't trust the head coach at all. I don't like
no,
him, and I don't like them in the playoffs. And that's not just this head coach. They've been a bad playoff team for 15 years now. When they make the playoffs, they've grossly underachieved. So there's something in that franchise where it's like all those Super Bowls and all that winning in the 90s. It's like they gave up something as they moved forward because they've just been a bad franchise in the playoffs. So, but I think
it's
the
true.
Cowboys are very dangerous in a bad NFC.
But when
I stand by
yeah,
the NFC stinks.
well, when you look at the Cowboys' next four games, they've got the Giants at home, they've got the Colts at home, they've got the Texans at home, and then they play at the Jaguars. So this is a team that could very easily be 11-3 going into that Eagles game.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, the Eagles have shown a little kink in the armor there. They haven't been nearly as good, and they
Yeah,
could have lost last week to the Colts. They
I know.
barely won after losing to the Commanders at home. So there's a little. The Eagles didn't win the division yet. They still got to work to win that division. They got a bunch of division games left. It's not over.
That's true. That's true. That's true. And that leads me to number five, Jeff Saturday. There was a lot of people saying that, what are they doing? I can't believe that the owner would pick his drinking buddy to come back and coach a team. This guy has never coached at any level before. He's a fantastic player, never coached before. And what does he do? His first game, he beats Las Vegas 25-20. His second game, he comes a minute from beating Philadelphia. Philadelphia had to come back and they won 17-16. Everybody was questioning this move. I mean, 2 games into it, I know it's a small sample size, but do you think he's brought some new energy to this team? And do you think that they're responding because of him?
Maybe I don't. I, I don't make as big a deal out of it as people did. I think I think sometimes you just see a spark, a team. They were actually a team predicted to by many to win the division before the year started.
They were. They
So
were.
so they have talent on the team. They've grossly underachieved, and they've had pockets of times they've played well. I think the Eagle game is what could have been their season. I think they had the ceiling of being a good NFL team.
Yeah.
They've
Yeah.
mostly been underachieving. I think he might do a pretty good job the remainder of the year. But I thought they had some talent there. I thought they made the quarterback change too soon. I would have left
Yeah.
Matt Ryan
Yeah.
alone. I
Yeah.
think he had
Yeah.
such a true proven track record. You didn't need to go see with the Ellinger or whatever. I think they just kind of made a couple of mistakes. I think got the coach fired too. I think in a lot of ways. Um, so I think the Colts are dangerous. I think they're a team that's still going to go 8-1, or whatever they're going to be,
Yeah.
7,
Yeah.
8 and whatever. So
Yeah.
they're a
Yeah.
500 team.
That's true. That's true. And then number six, I want to talk about the New York Giants. So you know what? They started off the season 6-1. They're 1-2 in their last 3 games. It seems like reality is kicking in. This is not a team that was supposed to be as good as they've appeared to be.
Yep.
The rest of their schedule is at Dallas, Washington, Philadelphia, at Washington, at Minnesota, Indianapolis, and at Philly. I mean, this is a team that could potentially, I mean, right now they're 7-3. They could potentially finish the season 7-10.
They probably won't, but yeah.
Do you think that they're going to end up with a winning record with all of those tough games ahead of them?
I think the bigger issue for them, and because I'm in this market, I've seen them play a lot this year. They've won a lot of really close games
Yeah,
against mediocre teams
that's
where
true.
they could have a very different record, and they would have been well on their way to that 6-11 season that many probably thought they were going to have, but they won all their close games. And usually in the NFL, you don't win all or lose all your close games, right? Like,
Yep,
just
yep,
by nature, that's just not the way it is. But in reality, if you look at their games, starting with week 1 when the Titans missed a field goal at the wire and the
yep,
Giants beat them,
yep.
they've just won a bunch of close games. Um, so I think it's they're going to trend, they're going to regress back a little bit to the norm. They also have a lot of injuries, in fairness to them, like a lot of big injuries. If I had a handicap, what I think the Giants are most likely to do still, I would say 9-8. I think is most likely to be the final record, which will put them on the cusp of the playoffs, but I think they'll miss. I could say they're not going to lose twice to Washington. Washington's not that good. They might beat the Colts at home. I mean, I'm looking at their schedule, like you just said.
Yeah, yeah,
And I do think Detroit. Remember, we saw Detroit have weeks where they played really well. Detroit's got like a pretty good offense and like a pretty weird team where they either are really hot or really cold week to week. So I don't necessarily think the loss to the Lions is as bad as maybe some people do. I think the
Yeah.
Lions are a decent team. I think they're better than people thought.
Yeah, they are. They are.
Some weeks again, and then they lay eggs some weeks. So who knows?
That's true. That's true. Well, that's good stuff, man. Phil's game ball. It is that time. Let's see who's going to get it this week. We've got Joe Burrow, 24 for 39, 355 yards, 4 touchdowns in a 37-30, much closer game than I would have thought, win at Pittsburgh. Devontae Adams, 7 receptions, 141 yards, 2 touchdowns in a 22-16 win at Denver. And Travis Kelce, 6 for 115, 3 touchdowns in a very close 30-27 win at the LA Chargers. Who's getting your game ball this week, Phil?
I think I've given it to him a few times, but I'm gonna give it back to Burrow. When you put up those numbers in Pittsburgh, I think that's a tough place to win. Um, even though they're not the same team, and he's doing it with some injuries on the line. I think Burrow's back to being Burrow from the team who went to the Super Bowl, and
Yep.
I think the
Yep.
Bengals are the under the radar team that could get back to the Super Bowl.
Yep.
It's
I
a
agree.
very tough AFC, but he's starting to play good. If this trend continues, they're going to be the team to watch out for because Burrow's the type of quarterback in terms of handling pressure, and he's
Yep.
got the type of receivers that could just put up 35, 40 in these playoff games and be a nightmare.
Easily.
So,
Easily.
I
Okay.
think look out Chiefs, look out Bills. There's a third team that has a real shot.
Okay.
And
Cool.
Dolphins, with all apologies to the Dolphins, they've been playing good, so I don't want to
Yeah,
rule them.
the Dolphins have had a really, really nice season, and that's probably going to continue against Houston this week. All right, fill up your bank account. It is time. Let's see if you can continue your hot streak in the NFL. Let's hear your games. We got a lot of good games this week, a lot of stuff to choose from. What do you got going on today, Phil?
So yeah. So I'm gonna make this a gobble gobble theme. We're gonna stay on Turkey Day.
Gobble, gobble, gobble.
Except for my best bet, I'm gonna pick all three of the Thanksgiving games just to have a
Okay.
little fun. It wasn't
Yeah, yeah.
my original plan, but I'm gonna stick with the Turkey Day games and then pick one best bet on Sunday. So let's go straight through, starting with the 12:30 kickoff. Um, so the Bills had a weird week. Like they played in Detroit against Cleveland with the snowstorm,
Yep.
and then they're back in Detroit on obviously short rest to play the Lions. Um, I got a sneaky feeling the Lions keep this game close. There's something about the Bills right now where they're not blowing anybody out. They're winning again. They kind of wrote the ship a little bit after losing to the Jets. They had a
Yep.
couple of tough games, but they're not clicking on all cylinders yet. Now, the Lions can be again. This game could be 38-10 Buffalo because if the wrong Lion team shows up, this could be ugly. I got a feeling though the Lions are going to put some points up. Josh Allen will pull a rabbit out of his hat and they'll beat them. But I actually think plus 9.5 feels good to me. I'm going to take the Lions. I think there's a little feel good around the Lions. They're 4-6.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not awful. I think I think they like that coach there. I think they're going to play a good game.
Okay.
The next game, okay, Giants Cowboys. Again, they have the same record, but can two teams with the same record look like they're going in different directions anymore? Like the Giants are trending down, the Cowboys off that win are trending up. Sometimes that scares me. And you say like, oh, they're still 7-3, but the Giants are a soft 7-3. I don't know what the Cowboys are. They're probably fairly 7-3, but the Giants are a soft 7-3. I'm going to take the Cowboys and lay the 10 points. Um, I just think the Giants now are going to have, like I said, I think they're going to have their return to what they probably should have been all year. I might still peg them with 9 wins, but that still means they're going to go 2-5 down the stretch. And this is definitely an L. So I'm going to take the Cowboys, lay the 10. I think the Giants will have major trouble keeping up with them. And then the Pats Vikings game. Okay, so this is your classic game that's a head scratcher.
Yep.
Because if not for the 40-3 beatdown, there's no way the Vikings are less than a 3-point favorite in this game. Like, Mac Jones hasn't been good. The Jets gave up nothing to him. And yes, Zach Wilson played awful. The Pats returned a punt to win the game.
Yep. Yep.
And okay, but like the Vikings to me are much better than the Patriots. I love this game. I think the Vikings win this game by much more than 2 points, which is the spread, 2.5 points. So I'm going to take the Vikings and I'm going to make it a double best bet. I'm going to take the Vikings as a best bet and then I like a game just as much on Sunday. So I'm going to do a double best bet. So if you're at home, little
Wow.
double best bet parlay, because I'm feeling really good about this parlay. I'm going
Wow.
Vikings laying 2.5. I think this game's got like 27-13 written all over it. I don't think it's that close. And I love the Commanders against the Falcons. It's not because the Falcons aren't decent, it's because the Falcons are terrible away from home. Mariota's way too inconsistent. And they get the Commanders. I just was praising their front seven, but their
Yep.
front four in particular. And now they get their best pass rusher back. The kid
Oh,
from
he's
Ohio
back.
State. He's back this
Chase
week.
Young. Yeah, yeah.
That is a stud pass rushing group.
Yeah, yeah.
Mariota is not, they're going to have trouble scoring to me in Washington. And they're laying 4.5. Doesn't feel like that much. Um, Again, one team who's just hot and has just a really good defense against a team that's just wildly inconsistent. The Falcons
Yep.
are all over the place.
Yep.
So I'm
Yep.
going to take the Commanders at home. And again, the Falcons have one win away from Atlanta. So
That's
this is
it.
a this is a bad, a typical dome team that's not very good but wins at home and loses on the road. This feels like they're a typical dome team to me. And they got some blowout losses on the road. They got some close losses too, but the Panther loss on the road is a head scratcher. So I'm going to go with the double best bet, Vikings and Commanders.
Wow. Wow. I love it. I
So
love it.
it's the picks this week. We're going to try
Throwing
to
us
keep the train going down the tracks.
two blocks. Well, man, listen, it's been a fun season so far, and it's not letting up. It's not letting up. This has just been so much fun seeing everything, and your picks have been on fire. So good luck to you, Phil,
Thank you.
and I hope that everybody really enjoys the weekend, enjoys the Thanksgiving, enjoys all the football. And I wanted to leave us all on one great note that I'm really excited about. Brown University student Olivia Pichardo. She became the first woman ever to make a Division One baseball team. So congratulations, Olivia. She did what neither of us on this podcast could do, and that is make a college baseball team. So I'm gonna have to look her up and see what she looks like in the field. She must be pretty good if she's making the team, or the team must be pretty bad. So congratulations to Olivia. I know she's a big fan of the podcast. Olivia, thanks for tuning in. Good luck on the season. Appreciate it.
That's really
Everybody
cool.
have a happy Thanksgiving. Don't eat too much turkey like I'm gonna do, and enjoy the football. If you're a fan of us, keep listening. Appreciate it. Give us some comments, give us some feedback on what's going on. If you don't like us, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your enemies, especially. They're really going to like the show. But most importantly, just tune in. Phil, another great episode, my friend. Great to have you back from Qatar. And I look forward to
Qatar.
finding out. I look forward to finding out where you're going to be this week. I know it's always a surprise to you and all the listeners.
Often it is. Often it is. We got a big budget though. Can't imagine where you're sending me next.
I don't know, man. We'll see. We'll see. But I'll let you know. I'll let you know. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and take care. Appreciate it.
See ya.